All right.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Survival Chicks for another podcast episode. Today, I'm super excited to have Derrick Broze with us. He is an author, journalist, and I would call him a privacy solutions expert. Hi, Derrick. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Excellent. I'm going to show the people the books that you've written. Oops, right here. Look at this. I've been listening to on Audible How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. The best part about these books is that you can read them for free. So they're free on Audible, some of them, and others you can download to your computer for free. Otherwise, you're welcome to purchase them to support Derrick. I'm going to be purchasing the trilogy here in hard copy just so that I can support Derrick and so that I can have it on my shelf because it's pretty amazing information in here.
Yeah, get you a
Excellent.
physical one.
Yeah, why not? And I didn't even know you had these ones until yesterday, actually. So I'm pretty excited to read up on what's going on over here.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely everybody check those all out. As you mentioned, I've tried to make most of the books available for free to download.
And this is on the Conscious Resistance Network.
Yep,
That's
consciousresistance.com.
really cool that you are offering those for free for the people to read.
Yeah, I think it's necessary to get the information out as much as possible. I mean, the books they sell regularly online, and I sell them at events, but they're not the bulk of my income, so I'm not really worried about it. What I care more about is getting this information out there, information that obviously I think is valuable, that I took the time to write. And yeah, people seem to appreciate having the audiobooks available and the PDFs available.
Yeah, awesome. It's really nice in the car, be able to listen to something other than music, you know? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what got you down this, path? How come you decided to be an activist and when did you start that?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I've been doing this journalism, activism, writing books, public speaking. This is what my daily life entails, and I've been doing that for about 14 years now, starting in Houston, Texas, where I'm originally from. And in the beginning, it was mainly just as an activist, just going out, protesting, marching, holding signs, and then eventually my activism started to become more solutions focused and building community gardens, teaching people how to grow food, skill shares, documentary screenings, activist house stuff, concerts, anything I could think of to try to bring people together. And along the way, realized that the media wasn't really doing a great job, and I started to see that I had a skill for research, that I had a knack for putting a camera in the faces of politicians and asking hard questions, and that they didn't really like that. And that sort of encouraged me to take my journalism a bit more serious. And so I started writing in the independent media in 2013, so just over a decade now, and then launched the Conscious Resistance Network, my website, in 2013 as well. So I've been doing the bulk of this now for about 10 years. And I wrote my first book, the first book in the Conscious Resistance trilogy, in 2015, and just started writing since then and producing documentaries and doing all these fun things that are really important to my life. I mean, this has become sort of a hobby that I did in my free time to becoming what I do every single day, all day, writing articles, doing videos, doing interviews, traveling for public speaking and things like that. And I really feel blessed and honored to be able to do that and to try to empower other people. But also, I will say that, even before that, because that was 2009, 2010, as my website is called The Conscious Resistance and the book's called The Conscious Resistance, my work does have a sort of spiritual tint to it, a kind of a looking for a deeper consciousness, deeper healing. And the reason that that is a part of my work, the reason I call it the conscious resistance, which I'll just define, I consider the conscious resistance to be the understanding that the struggle for a more free, ethical, and just world will not come from only confronting physical institutions of power, be that government, corporations, politicians. I think that's part of it. It's important. That's why I do journalism. But I also think there's another side of the coin, and that is what I call the struggle against our own internal tyrant, our doubts, fears, insecurities, and limiting beliefs, and things that can, and traumas which can hold us back and I think prevent us from being the best person that we are capable of being and the person that we happen to need right now in this moment in time in history. And so to me, the conscious resistance is sort of bringing those two things together. And the reason that that has been important to me and my message for so long is because I before I got woke up and got into politics, I woke up because I got addicted to drugs at 18 years old. I went to prison at 20, right before I turned
Mm.
21. Pretty much right after I got out of high school. Even I graduated early, very intelligent person, went into college, but I just, I got sucked into partying and I was already dealing with a lot of traumas and stuff in my younger age, self-harm, self-doubt, insecurities, and depression, suicide attempts, all that stuff. And so by the time I turned 18 and got into drugs and alcohol, it was pretty much just a couple of years of using those as escape mechanisms, coping mechanisms. And before I knew it, I got hooked on crystal meth and I got arrested November 2005, about a week before I turned 21. And it was that experience, not the prison system itself, because the prison system is a horrible place and it's not about rehabilitation. But that sort of gut check, I guess you could say, of when I got my sentence and I realized I'm not going home, like there's nothing I can do. I can call my lawyer, I can call my mom, I can call my girlfriend, I can cry, I can yell, whatever. I'm not going anywhere for at least the next year. When you have a feeling like that, which is something I don't think most of us experience in our day-to-day life because we feel very much in control. We can go where we want, we can do what we want. But when you really have a feeling of being completely powerless, where you're looking at the four walls around you and you realize you're not leaving until this person, these people say you can. You can no longer go to the bathroom in privacy. You can no longer go to sleep when you want. You can no longer move freely. All these kinds of things, like that was it was a very empowering thing in the end. It was a moment of feeling powerless and then finding my true power. And in prison, I discovered prayer, meditation, started doing a lot of healing on my trauma, specifically with my father, my relationship with him or lack of relationship. And when it was all said and done, I did 18 months behind Texas State institutions between November 2005 and October 2008. I did a year, got out, went back for 6 months, played that game for a little while as I was starting to kind of get the picture and realize that I needed to change my circumstances and also recognizing that there was something better out there for me. I didn't quite know what it was yet, but I knew that this wasn't what I wanted. Having grown up visiting my father in prison my whole life, I already knew sort of what that was about. And
Mm.
yeah, so that was kind of my first real awakening. And then after I got out of prison, I'm a felon now. I'm The depression is gone. The drugs, I've gone, and I've just excited for life for the first time and probably ever at 23 years old. And it was in that space that I started to go to the library, applying for jobs as a felon, and eventually read some books. Then, that led me to Ron Paul's work, some early Alex Jones stuff, some other books and documentaries. And it was, that was it. It was all over after that. But I kind of had that spiritual awakening, if you will, first, and then the political awakening came later.
And the spiritual awakening, you said it wasn't in prison, or was it in prison?
It was while I was in prison. I mean, that's like I would consider that, to use a common phrase, the dark night of my soul. I would say that was that moment where, I had burned a lot of bridges in that process of finding myself to prison, was homeless and all these different things. And so when I finally got there and realized like, all right, I know what this looks like. I need to figure out why I'm here and what I'm doing. And really I credit journaling, just, of course, getting sober and getting a clear head, but journaling, then prayer and meditation, which were things that I was totally not even open to or interested in prior to that. I have, been really blessed to have very strong female influences in my life. Both my grandmother's very spiritually aware, and I'm also Native American on one of my grandmother's side, and so I've been kind of primed to be open to these things, but I wasn't open to it until that point. And then my grandmother started sending me books about prayer, meditation, and just all kinds of different things that were really helping me in that space, which prison is filled with fear and anger and just all this ego and whatnot. And in that space, just really centering myself and taking time to try to figure out why I was there and what got me there.
Wow, what an incredible story.
Yeah.
So
Thank
you had your epiphany while you were getting sober in prison, of course, and then I'm guessing you had lots of time to read those books while you were there.
Yeah, I had a lot of
Wow.
time to read and reflect and grow as a person, and it was, of course, like we're all constantly growing. There's still so much growth, there's still so much more to come. But to be now here talking to people like you and talking about important topics, 14 years after starting on this journey, and almost 20 years since I got arrested, it'll be 2025 will be 20 years, which is just insane for me to kind of even wrap my head around. It is a good feeling. And my work, my journalism, which I value and I love, and I'm just it's my passion. As much as that is important to me, the conversations around addiction, mental health, suicide, depression, all these things are also equally important to me. And in the coming years, I expect that more of my work will be centered around that, because when people hear my story, I'll have people reach out and say, "Hey, Derrick, I struggled with this or that, or I never struggled with drugs, but I have this other issue, or I had a family member, or something to that effect." And if me sharing my story and just being open about it, I mean, for one, I have no shame or feel there's nothing I need to, I don't really care about being very open and blunt about it. But I notice that it does help other people maybe feel more comfortable in their story, in their journey. And in the end, I think that's really what we can do for each other, is try to help all of us who are struggling. Because, the bigger picture, the ideas that I know we're going to get into today, there's so many people, like, just as one example, if you had come to me back in 2004, 2005, when I was in the middle of struggling with all that, and said, "Derrick, do you know about all this stuff the government's doing? Have you heard about this thing and that thing?" I would have listened to you, and I would have even believed you. It's not like I trusted the government. I generally kind of had a, like, F the government attitude when I was younger, not in any kind of philosophical way, just more like, young, rebellious, whatever. I would have listened to you. I would have heard you. I would have been like, "Wow, that's crazy. Seriously? I can't believe that's happening." But I wouldn't have been able to do anything about it, because I was just trying to make
Right.
it through another day. And I think about that often, and how many other brothers and sisters are out there who are in their own, whether it's financial struggles, emotional struggles, mental health, self-doubt, etc., and how those can be roadblocks to preventing them from not only finding the self-worth to care about themselves and love themselves, but then to say, I deserve to be free. I deserve to have a life, of abundance, and kind of join us on this journey we're on here. I really do think that the more people who are struggling in those ways, the less likely they are to come to our kind of movements here. And then the other message of the conscious resistance is that if we only exit from slavery systems and focus our energy on building new physical institutions and exposing the corruption in the physical realm, but we ignore this internal work as well, it may be 1 to 2 to 3 generations or so, but I fully believe we will cycle back and create some of the same problems again, because our egos and our traumas and all the crap will start asserting itself, that, as humanity always deals with, and we will end up cycling back to become the same thing that we have. And that's not to say that we can create a utopia where everything's perfect and everybody, is gets along all the time, but surely human beings who have done some internal work and have the capability to have some emotional intelligence and have a way of communicating that doesn't involve tearing each other down, or just this ego driven thing that we see often in the mainstream world, surely working on that is going to get us in a better place. So to me, it's not just so much about, like, yeah, let's spiritual heal yourself. I think this is an integral part of creating a better world in the long term.
Oh, 100%. I'm totally on board with that. I feel like you can't do a whole lot unless you start here first. You know, this is the most
Exactly.
important place. And
This is
just
the
like you
most local
said,
you can be. Like, we talk about getting involved locally. Well, this is the most local you can be, in your own heart and your own mind.
yeah, and I feel that either a lot of people are not willing to go there because they're afraid of what they're going to see, or like you suggested, a lot of people are in a place where they're just surviving right now. They have so many things to think about and do, or so many things on their plate that's stressing them out that they don't, have the opportunity or the chance, or don't feel that they can go there right now.
And I would argue that that's probably by design, to keep
Yeah, oh
people in
yeah.
that rat race and that hamster wheel,
Yes.
so they can, only have enough, like, energy to come up for air every weekend and, drink a beer, like, oh God, I finally need some rest. Not enough time to, maybe I need to start thinking about all those issues that I'm processing and dealing with. It's absolutely by design. And my hope is that through conversations like this, and, of course, with my work and just sharing my story, that more people feel encouraged to make the time for that. Because ultimately, I do believe that we make time for the things that we value and care about, right? You can make
Yep.
time for the Super Bowl game, then you can make
Yep.
time to sit down and journal for an hour. If you
Yep.
can make time to go out with and spend $50 at the bar on the weekend, then you can make time to invest $50 in yourself to give yourself some skills that you might need in the future. There's so many ways that it's just about reframing our thinking,
Yep.
and you have to step out of that matrix. It's really what it is. And honestly, I think that's what me going to prison allowed me to do, because I was in such a trajectory where I was definitely headed to, that's a kind of cliche phrase of like, you're either going to end up dead or in prison. Well, it was true. And I ended up in prison. My father, he ended up dead, unfortunately. He did die of a
Mhm.
drug overdose eventually. So I know what this life
Wow.
leads to and where it goes. Um, and if I hadn't had such a kind of intense experience, which I guess is just what I needed for myself,
Yep.
of going to prison and kind of having this huge gut check, I don't know that I would have taken the time, because in the Conscious Resistance trilogy in book one, I have a chapter talking about solitude and like the power of being by yourself. And I give two examples of how solitude has helped me in so many ways. I'm kind of a solitary person. I love, I'm kind of an introverted extrovert, or vice versa. I love being around people to some extent, but I also like being here with my books and my work and everything else. And in my book, I talk about going to prison and how that sort of forced me to be alone. Like, yes, I'm in a room with 50 other people, but I'm truly alone. I'm like by myself mentally. I have to figure out what am I going to do, and I, like I said, I started doing a lot of journaling, writing, processing my feelings, my thoughts, and all these things. And then after I got out of prison, and I was just so thrilled and happy to be alive and be free, I ended up taking a 3 month bicycle tour across the United States. And from January 1st, 2011, spent 3 months on the road, made my way up through the mountains of New Mexico. And every day on the road, I was meeting random strangers who wanted to pray for me, who wanted to give me a jar of peanut butter, who wanted to offer me a trip to the next town. And I learned so much about myself on that trip, like both the ups, the downs, what I'm capable of, what I'm capable of putting myself through. And just, it was also at a time where I needed to realize that there was still good people, because I was just starting to wake up, and
Mm.
I was kind of in that panic mode, like, oh my God, it's all about to happen and everything's crazy. And so both those experiences, though, putting myself out there, one by choice and one involuntarily, led to some really powerful growth in my life that I still cherish very deeply now, a decade later. So highly encourage people to, in whatever ways, that are suited to you. I offer all kinds of different ideas on modalities for healing and stuff in here. Find that time. Sometimes for me, I don't necessarily meditate every day like I used to in prison anymore, but sometimes it's just sitting here at my desk in my chair with all the devices off for 5 to 10 minutes before I go to bed, and just collecting my thoughts and processing everything that happened from the moment I woke up to the moment I'm about to go to sleep. And what I find, at least, is when you do that, even just that simple kind of exercise, as you're going through your day and you're thinking, oh, I ran into so and so at the grocery store, you start reflecting, and little thoughts that maybe came in passing, or they were come back to you, and you're able to sort of sit with them deeper and maybe write them down, or just little things that your subconscious is holding on to that maybe you haven't allowed to your conscious to become aware of, will float to the surface. And so I highly recommend people, whatever your preferred modality is, whether it's just sitting in your comfortable chair for 5 minutes alone by yourself, or a meditation or something to that effect. Time with yourself and your own heart and mind is so important, especially as we're living in a world that is increasingly trying to pull our direction in a million different directions. And that is back to what we were saying. If you're underpaid and you're barely surviving and you're just stressed out all the time, then sure, the best thing it's gonna sound like the best thing to go let some steam off at the bar of the weekend,
Mm.
instead of taking some time to yourself, instead of investing that money into skills that you might need in the coming future that we're facing, instead of finding other like-minded people. So they want you to be stressed out. The system would prefer you to be stressed out, barely making it, and just barely head above water, so that you never have time to do this deeper work. And this deeper work in turn leads you to deeper work in the physical realm, getting yourself more prepared, in terms of privacy, in terms of not being dependent on what I consider to be slavery systems that are being built in front of us.
100%. I just started reading a book that I thought I had read forever ago, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it really talks about getting out of the rat race, and it explains how we are here and how to start moving out. And I think that a lot of people just don't know that there is another way, right? So they don't think that meditation is for them, or that that's going to be helpful in any way. But they also can't see that doing something different than, going and spending $50 at the bar to let loose for a little bit. They don't know that there's another road out as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think that is the case. part of my work as well has been to my work and the work of some of my peers, like with the Freedom Cell Network and the Greater Reset event that I host, has been to try to, I guess, plant a flag in the broader truth, freedom, conspiracy, whatever you want to call it, space, because there's all these intersecting movements that have now kind of overlapped a little bit here. The space that I've been trying to hold is to say, let's focus on solutions. There's 1,000
Yes.
podcasts out there talking about all the problems. And if you want to
Yes.
consume that all day and be miserable and then go to the
Yes.
bar and drink away your problems, then that's, you have those options. But if you want to try to actually do something about the things that we are finding out about, because like I mentioned earlier, when I first woke up, I was in that, what I can jokingly sometimes refer to as the Alex Jones phase. I was kind of like in the fear, porn, panic, like, oh my God, everything bad is all about to happen. And it wasn't that the information wasn't true. It was just that I was feeling the intensity of the way that it was being broadcast to me. And I see other people go through that. You go through a kind of panic stage. You tell everybody you can. You drive your friends and family crazy. And, we've all been through it to one degree or another. And I remember going through that. And then eventually I had to get to a place of saying, okay, well, what can I actually do about this? I don't want
Yeah,
to just
what
go
now?
out and scare people and say, hey, look, guy, here's all this horrible stuff happening. Have a nice day. Like, I'd like to be able to say, hey, here's something really bad we're concerned about, and come join us because we're a group of people doing something about it. We meet every month and we do these various events, and come join us. And here's our website, and things like that. And so I've always been very solutions oriented. I try to on the local level, and now I try to use my journalism to sort of educate, empower, awaken people. But then really with my books and some of my more philosophical work and my talks, it's about like, well, what can we do now? Okay, now you've woken up. There's a matrix. You see
Oh,
things are bad, but what do you actually do next? How do we actually help each other instead of just I joke, like I sometimes see people like they'll turn off the mainstream, they get rid of TV, they avoid all the mainstream propaganda, but then they just sort of switch to alternative media and they're like, oh, what's Derrick up to? What's this person up to? And they just going from one channel to the next, to the one podcast to the next, and they're consuming all this information. But then what are you doing with it? Because I guess I've come to a place where I realize that I don't think it's enough to be awake anymore. I think we need to be activated. We need to be proactively involved in our communities with our families, our friends, churches, whatever you've got, and trying to figure out what solutions are we going to see. Because if we all see the train wreck ahead, what are we going to do? Is the plan just to talk about it until it's eventually here, and then whoops, it's here. We didn't do anything. We just watched it come. And I guess that's just doesn't it doesn't feel like enough for me. So that's why a lot of my work has focused on being more proactive and solutions oriented.
well, and it doesn't feel good, right? To just talk about the negative stuff. And you're right, all the podcasts, that's all they're about. And I go and listen to them because I'm looking for solutions. And they just talk about this is what's going on in the world. This is the shit that's coming down. This is it. This is it. And nobody really says a whole lot about what they're doing, what other people could do. They don't really have too many ideas. I feel specifically I started Survival Chicks because of this particular reason. When the last 4 years, a lot of us started to wake up. I didn't get to wake up in the early 2000s like you did. I mean, I knew there was some stuff, but I wasn't really awake. And I started to see my friends start to wake up, and they were like, uh-oh, what are we going to do? Like, everybody was calling me going, what am I going to do about this? Like, how am I going to get through this one? I was like, okay, well, let's not panic. Let's form a community, first of all, because probably a bunch of us have different thoughts and we could share, you know? So um what would you say? And then through doing all of that, I feel like once you are doing stuff, once you are taking steps, and I'm sure you can attest to this, you feel better, right? Because you feel like you've done
Absolutely.
something and you're prepared in case something does take place, and you're protected in some way that you weren't before.
What I was saying is, first off, thank you for the effort that you've put into trying to bring your community together to focus on solutions, because I think that's what we need more than ever. And I'm grateful to see that there's more podcasts and in-person events that are focusing on solutions. James Corbett has done great work over the years with his Solutions
Love
Watch,
him.
trying to highlight. So I mean, it's cool to see now there is kind of this like part of the broader movements that we're the ones focused on solutions, and hopefully we're going to pull more people along. Unfortunately, the internet, the algorithm seems to prefer the drama and the kind of salacious. So I like, just as one example, I've noticed over the years, I can talk about Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein, some of my work on that, which is important. Expose that, it needs to be exposed. But I could do a video about Jeffrey Epstein or some bad news item, and then I can talk about solutions, and you can guess which video is going to get more attention. I could do a video about here's how to build a community garden and make X amount of dollars in 1 acre, and then a video about here's the latest Epstein documents. And people tend to go to the Epstein, to the drama,
That's
to
fair.
the salacious stuff. And it's unfortunate, but I've seen that. So I'm glad to see there are more people focused on the solutions. And what you said earlier, I think is very true, that when you start to be proactive in this way, you do feel better. You feel like you're actually doing something. And I don't mean in this sort of like false sense of like, hey, pat myself on the back, I've done something. But for example, I'll have people ask me, how do you not get overwhelmed? You do all this different work, how do you not feel stressed out about all the scary things you're writing about? And the answer is basically what you're saying. It's because I'm so proactive that I don't have time to sit around and like, oh my God,
Mm,
everything's going. It doesn't mean that I don't see it. And rest assured, we are dealing with a very scary, difficult agenda that precedes all of our lives. Just as an example, I spoke to my 88-year-old grandma who just celebrated her birthday yesterday, and she's been awake to this agenda since she was a child. This precedes all of us, right? So we're dealing with some big circumstances, but that doesn't mean there aren't positive things happening. And
oh,
if your gaze is only on what they want you to talk about, and I've been kind of hammering on this recently on social media, like just as an example, last week, if you were focused on Donald Trump's court cases or Joe Biden's
mm,
documents or Tucker Carlson and Putin, in my view, you're talking exactly about what they want you to talk about. You're like letting these folks be in charge of your attention span, your energy, and then that's basically your life, right? So if you take that control back, you take control of your own energy, your own attention span, and you redirect it towards positive solutions that actually can empower your community, you're going to feel so much better. It doesn't mean everything's solved and there's nothing bad that can happen to you, but when you are being more proactive, like if you've got some food put away, if you're off big tech and you're taking steps to get out of the banking system or whatever strategies you want to try, you know that you're actually doing something. You're not just sitting there consuming podcasts and being just overwhelmed by fear. So you can take in that information and say, okay, well, they're doing that, well, we're going to keep growing our food, we're going to keep
yeah.
building our community here, let them do what they're going to do and we're going to do what we do. And I think that's really where that's where that empowerment, that activation is. The moment you recognize that
Yes.
you actually are in control, you still are in control. And despite the decades and generations of planning that this cabal, or what I call the predator class, whatever you want to name it, has, that doesn't mean things are hopeless. That doesn't mean there's nothing we can do. In fact, it serves their agenda to make us believe that things are hopeless and that they have so
Yes.
much power, we might as well just give up. And I've met these people. This term, black pilled, has become more common recently in the internet age, of people who just basically have checked out and they don't think there's any solutions, anything you can mention. Like, for example, somebody will say, oh, Derrick, you really think they're going to let you build your own food? Don't you see all these bills they're trying to pass? They're going to ban growing food. Don't you hear Klaus Schwab? You're going to
Right.
own nothing and be happy.
Right.
And my question usually is, so does that mean you're going to listen? Like, you're going to listen to what they claim? I mean, for me, we're going to keep doing whatever we want and living our lives as free people, and doing and encouraging other people to do the same. And if these two sides ever meet, then we'll deal with those consequences at that time. But in
Right.
the meantime, I'm going to focus on what I can do for myself and my community, getting organized on the local level through things like Freedom Cells and the Freedom Cell Network, or just building community in your area. It's so important. So I say all that to say, don't be overwhelmed by the big picture. Be aware, keep your eye on that, but also keep your eye on the game and keep yourself focused on what you can actually do with yourself. Don't allow yourself to be disempowered, or for content creators or journalists to make you believe that there's nothing you can do, because I think that is just the worst message to be putting out right now. And it's not about selling false hope. I would say false hope is political solutions, violence, those sort of things. I don't have any faith or belief that those are anything along those lines is going to come save us. I think it's up to each of us as individuals and communities all around the world, not just in the United States, to really start thinking of what we can do to protect our communities, our families, our friends, our circles from these agendas that we know are real and are happening, but at the same time, they are not in control of every aspect of our lives. Like, just the
No,
fact that
and
this movement is growing, the fact that we're having these conversations proves that they can't stop everything.
no. And like you said, there are silver linings. There's so many reasons why so many of us are doing different things in the last 4 years. And it's all because of this darkness that we see. I do believe that because the dark is becoming so engaged and is becoming bigger, the light is also becoming brighter, because there has to be that contrast. The only reason that I started doing, X, Y, and Z and becoming a homesteader is because I saw those things happening, right? So it does bring benefit. And that's the reason why I'm bringing this community together of survival chicks. I wouldn't be doing this otherwise. And I know plenty of other women and people who are doing the same sort of thing that they never would have chose to do if they hadn't seen this darkness approaching, So it is
Exactly.
definitely silver lining filled.
It's like they're the best players on our team because I mean they give us the inspiration, and I really truly on sort of like a higher spiritual perspective of this. I believe everything that is happening is meant to happen. I believe that we're having this conversation because we're meant to connect. I believe that this is why I'm here on this planet. This is why you're here on this planet. Everybody who chooses to step into that role, like you're here to be an activator in your sphere of influence, to encourage, to empower other people. So, everything like if there weren't all this scary stuff happening, then Derrick Broze, fresh out of prison, wouldn't have had anything to wake up to be on this journey, right? If they weren't doing the things they're doing, I would have no reason to wake up. I would have no reason to be pursuing a better world. And in the beginning, it was very much like a reaction. Oh, scary people, bad people doing bad things. How can I protect myself from fluoride in the water or poison in the food and all this stuff? But then eventually, like with homesteading, permaculture, these topics, at least for me, and I think most of us, you come to realize, well, this is just a better way to live. I think I'd rather be
Yeah.
more in control of my life. So it's not so much about, oh, we're running from them anymore. It's like that was the initial reaction. And then you
Yeah.
get to a point where you're like, no, this is just what I prefer. So even if I woke up tomorrow and found out, you know what, I really was just a conspiracy theorist, none of this stuff is real, I think I'm still going to stay on this path because it seems more productive and valuable and better
Yay.
overall.
Definitely going to stay on this path. I've thought about that. And not just, are we conspiracy theorists and we realize it? It's also, what if it changes? Like at any time, they haven't won. So what if at any time it actually changes and it goes back to normal or, life changes around us? I'm okay. I'm going to stay doing what it is that I'm doing. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly. Just keep going. And to that point about if things go back to normal, I will say that we saw some of that happen in the post-COVID. Like, I mean, I hate to even say post-COVID because who knows what's up their sleeve, but it
Yeah.
feels like we're somewhat away from that
Right.
particular agenda. But even in the 2022, going into 2023, once things started to kind of calm down, I saw a lot of people going back to normal, whatever normal was for them. During COVID time, I live in Mexico now. I have, my
Hmm.
family's in Texas, but I come to Mexico. We have land out here now, and my partner, her family's from here. So we've been planning to come here already. When COVID happened, we just decided, you know what, rather than waiting 5 years, let's just accelerate our plans and go right now. Let's start looking for land. And so there was a lot of people coming from Canada, Germany, Australia, some of the worst places that were the most authoritarian during COVID. And of course, a lot of Americans who felt like Mexico would be a safe place for them temporarily, long term, depending on people. And it was for the most part. I mean, Mexico never had shot requirements, mask requirements, test requirements, quarantines, any of that stuff. It was one of only two places in the world that didn't. And so there was a lot of movement, a lot of people looking for land, freedom cells popping up all over the country. Just all this activism was taking place. And then as things started to go back to normal, you start to notice people just flying back home to wherever home is. Like okay, I'm going to go back to the country that just tried to lock me down in my house and just hope things never happen again, which to me is not a very wise move in the long term. Because to me, it's like they've already showed their cards. They've already showed their hand. We know what
Yep.
they're capable of.
Right.
Lockdowns, coercion, firing people from jobs, these kinds of things, whether it's about climate or pandemics or whatever, we've
Yep.
seen the tools. And that's what I talk about in the How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. We've seen their tools now and what they're willing to do, and we should expect they will use them again in some other capacity in the future. So then the question is for each individual, what's the best move for you? Is going home to a nation that just showed you they're willing to be authoritarian, is that the best move? It might be. Maybe you got more of a community there than you would in some other country or some other city. Some people, they didn't move countries, they just moved from California to Texas, for example. A lot of people went to Texas or Florida.
Right.
Sometimes moving might be necessary to maintain the freedom and the liberty that you really desire. I mean, we have to sometimes acknowledge that the truth is there are some parts of the world and parts of the United States that are more free than others.
Yep.
And so it's important for you to know, what are your red lines? The reason I chose to leave to Mexico pretty quickly. As I said, we had plans to do so already. But when I heard the discussion on TV in or late February, early March about discussions of shutting down interstate travel, there was already where
Mm.
they were starting to check license plates leaving New York and
Mm-hmm.
license plates
Mm-hmm.
leaving Rhode
Mm-hmm.
Island. That has always been a red line in the sand for me, because even if the cage is the size of Texas, to me, it's
Mm-hmm.
like it's still a cage. I don't like not knowing I can't travel if I want to travel. And so within a day, we packed the car and we headed to the border. Like I've just always known, for me, that's a line. And I didn't know what was going to come next. I just felt like I'll feel safer watching it from the other side of the border and then figuring out what was next for us. So everybody has to make those decisions in their own time and do what's best for their families and things like that. But I would really encourage people not to kind of fall back into this false sense of comfort and complacency that things have gone back to normal. So now there's no more reason for me to listen to survival chicks and learn about homesteading because, well, things are normal. Why should I bother? I'm going to go back to my daily routine, right? I would very, very much caution people against falling into that trap, because I don't think that, as much as we are seeing some beautiful things, I still do think there's tough times ahead. But that's why it's
Mm-hmm.
so important we're having these conversations now and being forward thinking instead of playing catch up later on.
So, what do you think is something? I know that your book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, is really all about solutions, and you can start from doing something small and you can continue on and do something bigger, etc. What would you say to the people listening today? Like, what might be something that somebody who is busy and is used to just letting off some steam on the weekends, and maybe they listen to this and they want to do something different? What would you say something they could do might be to start somewhere?
Sure. The first thing I would say is find that quiet space and time I was talking about
Mm.
earlier. Pull out a pen and pad, or your keyboard or whatever, your phone, and start making a list of goals that you have. Like, just sort of take an assessment of where you're at. Okay, I don't have financial abundance right now, so it's going to be kind of hard for me to buy the land I want. But that's, so you got a goal of I would like land, for example, and maybe that's a bigger picture. That's not going to happen this year, but within 5 years, right, or within 10 years, whatever you think is reasonable for your situation. So that's the big picture, long term goal. So what can you do today in the moment to start moving that ball forward? Okay, you decide, you know what, I am going to start skipping some of the bar trips on the weekend so I can save that little bit of cash. And even though I can't get land yet right now, I'm going to start learning about permaculture and homesteading, because the internet is a beautiful place filled with all kinds of free information, and there's so many people ready to offer it to you. And maybe you start thinking, you know what, I can dedicate at this point 1 hour a week to getting home from work and watching videos about permaculture and homesteading, and just start making that a part of my daily routine or weekly routine, right? So now you're starting to gain more knowledge and gain a little bit of information. Even though you can't get the land yet, you're moving towards that goal. Because what's the point of waiting 10 years and then you buy the land, but you don't have any skills? You might as well
Mm.
start giving yourself some skills and some knowledge now. Little things like that. And you showed all of my books earlier. This one, the holistic self-assessment, which is this is basically the process I took myself through in prison, and it is a spiritual slash psychological book. But what it really comes down to, this is about helping you set and accomplish goals. You see, it's very thin and simple, because I took like a lot of big ideas and my own ideas and tried to make it as simple as possible. And for me, things like to-do lists really do help my mind, because I'm all over the place sometimes. And so when I have to sit down and say, okay, what is my to-do list for my land? What is my to-do list for my journalism? What is my to-do list for family? And I break it down like that. And again, looking at what is the long-term goal. Okay, the land. We've got the land now. Okay, well, what's the next thing? We want to start building our homes, and start where you are and start just imagining the big picture, but don't get overwhelmed by the big picture. See where you're at, what you want to get to, and then what can you do now for yourself. And the other thing I'll recommend is, and I think I talk about this in one of the books, that there are, in addition to what I call YouTube University, which is just like the beauty of us as a human species, one of us figures something out and we're like, hey, I'm going to teach other people how to do this and throw it on the internet. You can find so many valuable tutorials and resources, not only on places like YouTube, but there are online universities that are, many of them are free. One I've used is called EDX, and EDX has all kinds of different stuff. I mean, I've taken journalism courses just because I wanted to learn more from kind of, that perspective and padding some of my skills I've learned on my own. I've taken marketing courses. I mean, just so many different things. In terms of permaculture, discoverpermaculture.org, which is Jeff Lawton, this Australian teacher, he's got, I think, 4 free introductory videos that just help you understand permaculture from different climates and different regions. My point is that there's so many free, readily available resources that are there for you. It's just about, do you have the drive? Do you have the initiative? Are you willing to manage your time better? Because, I'm not saying give up your social life totally and never go out or anything, but maybe skipping the bar one weekend a month or every other weekend you go instead. And that money that you would be spending, you put that into like, oh, this is for my homesteading goals, or this is for
Mhm.
my skill shares that I want to gain, right? And instead of investing the money in some beer company that doesn't need your money, or the bar that doesn't really need your help, invest in yourself, invest in giving yourself skills, and also if you are in a position where you have extra finances, some people have got money, they're just sitting in the bank and they want to know what to do with it. They see CBDCs coming and they don't want to just leave it there. Well, again, if you've got the resources, financial resources, which puts you further ahead than many of us, then use that money to invest in yourself. Get land if you can. But again, in the meantime, while you're looking for your land, start taking some online courses, things that are interesting to you, whether it's permaculture, homesteading, raising chickens, whatever. And or more technical things. It could be, about how to get off big tech, how to stop using Google. Put your energy and your money and your time into those goals you have. And I promise you, if you just think even in 1 month, so if you did this for just 1 month, 1 month of committing the bare minimum, 1 hour a week to learning some new skill. By the end of that month, you've got 4 hours of new knowledge that you didn't have at the beginning of the month. Now do that the whole year. And then imagine, okay, now I can commit 2 hours a week, right? I mean, before you know it, you are an expert in this skill, this thing that you want to learn more about, or at least you've got a lot more knowledge than you did when you were just going to the bar every weekend and not doing anything practical for yourself. So I really encourage people to think about it in terms like that. We don't ever, many of us, like, we don't bat an eye to spend $7 at some drink at the coffee
Mhm.
shop or whatever. And you do that how many times a week? But then
Mhm.
when somebody's like, hey, spend $100 on this program that's going to give you all these skills, you're like, oh my God, $100.
You're like,
And
yeah.
it's just about reframing this, right? Think about like where your money is going, and are you currently spending $10 a month on Netflix and Amazon Prime and this thing and that thing?
Yeah.
You start to think about all this extra resources you actually do have available to yourself if
Yep.
you were to go without certain things. And then, you're not really going without, you're investing in yourself, you're empowering
Yeah, you're
yourself.
just doing something different. You're not going without, you're doing
Exactly.
something different. And when I
Exactly.
when you start doing those things, like, you actually get interested, right? So there's going to be stuff that really piques your interest and you're like, "Well, this is really fun." And then you start talking to other people about it and you start to notice that maybe there's other people who also have that interest that you have. And if you don't have the money to buy the land, I say, instead of opting out and going, I can't afford it for anything, it doesn't matter if you've got that course, that $100 course, and you're like, I can't afford it. Well, maybe you can't, but why don't you say this? How can I afford it? If I say, how can I afford it? Then my brain starts to think. And now I
Exactly.
think of different things, or I think of people who are also interested in the same thing. And maybe we can share and we can combine resources and do something together. You know, I think
Absolutely.
thinking is important.
Well, and just to add to that idea you shared there, which I think is a really great idea, and everybody should definitely embrace that. Look, if the permaculture course, just again as an example, is $1,000 or it's a few $100s, and it's just out of your budget, again, you don't have to do this alone. I mentioned Freedom Cells earlier. I encourage everybody to visit freedomcells.org. It's
Yes.
CELLS.org, like the cells in your body. The Freedom Cell Network is this distributed, decentralized, worldwide network of people who are having conversations like this. And the cells or the pods or the hubs or the hives, the name really is irrelevant. It's just, about coming together in this local group. So you end up with 7 or 8 people in your local area, or maybe just a handful of people that are thinking in terms like this. And like you said, there's a really awesome course that you think could benefit you, but you realize not only could it benefit you, it could benefit everybody in your group. So why don't you guys pool your resources together? Instead of it being $500 for one person, everybody's chipping in $100, and that becomes a lot more affordable. Or maybe you're in a freedom cell that you got some parents and some young kids, and so you're thinking about homeschooling or unschooling, and how do you do that? Well, we can't all afford to hire a tutor to teach the kids. So then again, you come together as a group and you say, let's all pool our resources. Let's hire a tutor that we each feel comfortable with, and they'll teach our kids together as a group instead of us all going about it alone. And I
Heck
think that
yes.
that is so important to recognize that. That's the value and the power of community. This is why
Community.
they locked us down. They wanted us to be separated from each other, not
Yes.
able to communicate, not able to talk. And it's so valuable. So if you whether you use the Freedom Cells website or not, the point is coming together in localized groups, focusing on solutions, not just groups that get together to talk about the problems. And this is one of the things that I think distinguishes Freedom Cells from other things, because you might be hearing that and thinking, oh, well, Derrick, I'm already a part of 5 activist groups already, and maybe those are groups that exist on the internet only, and it's just a place to chat or to share about all the bad news in the world. And maybe even you meet once a month with another group, but it just socializing and talking about the problems. That's not what I'm talking about. There's value, of course, to us getting together and socializing and being able to communicate freely, but at some point, you do got to get to a point of, okay, what are we going to do though? We're just, okay, we've been meeting for 6 months and all we've done is sit and talk and we hang out for a couple of hours and it's nice, but nothing's happening. No progress is being made. That is not what Freedom Cells is about. Freedom Cells is like taking the most activated people from those other groups and then trying to create a group that's like, let's get shit done. Let's actually focus on real world goals and accomplishing. And kind of like I was saying earlier, instead of just you're one individual and you're setting your goals, but as a group, let's set goals together as a group. For example, we have the Morelia Freedom Cell out here where I live in Mexico, and I've been gone traveling a little bit, but it's so cool to see they're still doing things. And when I'm getting back, now that I'm back, I plan to get more involved. But just this last week, they had a meeting about getting everybody together for an emergency bag or, a bug out bag. We like to use the term emergency because it doesn't have to be about bugging out because some government shutdown, blah, blah. It could be a weather emergency. It could be anything, right? The point is being prepared, being proactive. So we get together as a group and everybody says, okay, we got our bags now. What's in your bag? What's in your bag? And we compare notes and we see what's good. And the idea being that everybody in the group is kind of on equal footing so that you've got 5 to 6, 7, 8, 10 people that if there is an emergency, everybody's got their own bag filled with the same or very similar supplies. The group is talking about taking a self-defense class together. We've a couple of us got ham radios, so we're going to do a ham radio skill share together. This is the kind of thing that Freedom Cells are about, like being more proactive. Again, not preparing for doomsday, but just being proactive and preparing for anything that could happen. There's this kind of propaganda that has come into our world in the last decade or so. I think largely because of that show, Doomsday Preppers, that people associate prepping, which what is that word really? Preparation. We've
Yeah.
been conditioned to think preparing is a bad thing, and that makes you some kind of crazy person. But
Yep.
as I mentioned earlier with my grandma, the generations before us have been preparing forever. They knew that if you don't can your harvest, then when the winter comes, you're gonna die, and all your animals are gonna die, right? So you got to bale the hay, you got to store your food, you got to do things. That's just what every single one of our ancestors have done to get us to this point. And now in our modern age, where things are so much more convenient, or at least we believe they are, most people aren't thinking in those terms. And we've been taught, oh, you must be one of those crazy preppers or something. Like there's something wrong with that. So we need to get out of that conditioning and see that there really is value in coming together in these localized groups and focusing on things like this and setting goals as individuals and setting goals as a group. How far
I
can
love
our
it.
group be in 6 months? What can we accomplish for the next year together? And,
I
and
love it.
that's what I'm really excited about, because I think that is going to be, this is the future, like for those of us who plan to not only survive, but thrive through whatever the heck's coming.
I love that and it makes you feel good to know that there's people on your page that they're in your group and they're willing to, they want you to succeed as well, right? They're there for you.
Exactly. You're building that sense of camaraderie, and that like it's just there's like a mental component of knowing
Yes.
that you're not just okay another day consuming podcasts, and when you get together with your friends we just commiserate about how horrible the world is. Instead, you're more excited. You're it does enrich your life. Like I really do think so.
100%.
And I want to mention while we're talking about freedom cells, because this week starting today as we're recording, there's a 5-day freedom cell challenge going on right now. People can
Ooh,
find info about this on the freedomcells.org website. And so
nice.
literally right now as we're talking, there's a discussion group happening. I think we had 300 people from around the world all this week. If you want to learn more about the Freedom Cell Network, get onboarded, including how to sign
Ooh.
up on the website, how to find people, our maps are really the kind of key focus of it. We have, you sign up like any social network. put in your name, put in your, all that stuff. But really, you also put in your skills. What are your goals? What are your interests? And then you can assign a label like, hey, I'm a permaculturist, or I'm a farmer, or I'm a technologist. You can also assign a label that says you have land, or I'm looking for land, or looking for community. And then you add your location. We don't want your home address, but put the town that you're closest to or whatever. And that adds you to our map. So then when people come and join, they can
Yeah.
search the member map and search the cell map and show me all the people who have joined within 10 miles of where I'm at. And then you can look at those people and, hey, look, this person's got similar interests. Let me connect with them. Let me look at their profile. Let me message them. Hey, they're near me. Let's meet up for coffee and see if we want to start a freedom cell together. Or you find out there's already a group in your area and they're already doing things. So you go show up to those meetings. That is where the magic really happens. And I can say that during COVID, when people were locked down, we heard from so many stories from people of how they use the Freedom Cell Network and the maps to find people when they were just completely locked down. And I actually, the most recent edition of How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, I published last year. It's the second edition, so it's a post-COVID edition. I published the book originally January 2020, right before COVID, and then obviously we learned a lot after
Ah,
that. When I wrote the book, we hadn't even heard the term vaccine passports yet, or the Great Reset and stuff like that. So I felt like I wanted to do an update. I wrote 5 new chapters, which are very much sourced from what we heard from people all around the world of how they avoided travel restrictions, how they use the Freedom Cell Network for homeschooling, for growing food, and just kind of taking that information from the worldwide community and trying to share that with everybody. So if you do pick up the book or you read the latest edition, it includes those 5 new chapters that really can give you some more tools and ideas on how to navigate any future calamities that we might face. And even if we don't, even if there's no more crazy things that they do, the point is we still need these ideas. It doesn't matter what they're doing. At the end of the day, we need to come together. We need to build stronger communities, because I think
yes.
most of us do want a better world. We do know that there's all sorts of things wrong with the current world. That's one thing right that they have, is they know that the world is in a bad place. Of course, they helped create it, and now
Yeah.
they're proposing false solutions. But they are correct that the world in some way does need a reset or a rethinking of how we do it. Not in their way, top down, centralized control, but from a bottom up, grassroots, localized perspective. That's what we're trying to build. And so the Freedom Cell Network is part of that. We got the Freedom Cells Challenge going all this week, and I encourage people to check that out if you got some time.
That's amazing. One last thing I'd like you to touch on. I know that you're either part of this company or you like to represent it, but the above phone.
Yeah, so above phone is my buddy Hakeem Anwar. He's formerly known as Ramiro Romani. He's also from Houston. He's an activist I knew for years out there, and we first got connected because he comes from actually a big tech background originally. He was working in New York, living the big tech life, and had his own awakening experience and realized I don't want to serve these companies with the tools I have. I want to actually use my skills for something better. And at the same time, he was learning about the Freedom Zone Network. So he ended up helping us design the website and was our tech guy for a good while, kind of getting that off the ground. And at the
Amazing.
same time, yeah, I'm not the tech savvy guy. I know how to turn the camera on and use the rest of the tools, but this is like our go-to privacy tech guy. I would definitely encourage you to interview him as well. He launched his company Above Phone in I think 2020, yeah, probably 2020. And what he sells, he's actually recently, now they launched the Above book, so they're selling privacy laptops
Yes.
too. These are basically de-Googled Android phones, so they've had all the spyware stripped out of them, and then which anybody can do that. You can look up videos and figure out how to do your own. What they offer though is brand new out of the box phones. They have a whole team that goes through and strips all the spyware out of the phones, and then they actually load them with their own kind of custom suite of apps. Like instead of Google Maps, you've got Organic Maps. Instead of
No.
YouTube, you've got NewPipe, and so it has alternative versions for everything
Wow.
that you're used to doing. And this is what I'm saying:
Wow.
like these solutions already exist; they're already available. I don't use a phone personally, but my partner Miriam, she has the Above phone. So when we try to, like for example, when we were traveling Mexico, you can use Organic Maps just like you would use Google Maps traveling via Wi-Fi. But the other benefit is you can actually download the map. So if you aren't connected to the internet, if you lose service, your phone can still, it's basically like having a physical paper map, but in a digital form. And so, yeah,
Amazing.
their phone offers all the different alternatives you would want. They also offer an email service. They have what they call the Above Suite, which is like their whole suite of tools. They get you email. They just launched their VPN as well. So this has, I think, been a very big missing kind of aspect of a lot of toolkit, because like I said, even the best activists out there, many of them are still using Google. They're still
Of course.
organizing everything they do on Google
Yes.
or Microsoft or whatever. So Hakeem helps people switch over to Linux if they want on their operating system, gets them set up with the phones. And yeah, now they're launching the Above book in the last month or so. And I know he's got some big plans for some new companies. He's just announced at the Greater Reset last month that he's launching this company called Above Energetics soon, which is going to be focusing on technology for health that is being suppressed. And so, he's kind of merging like his company his kind of phrase is take back our tech, right? So he's talking about taking back our tech, not only in terms of privacy and digital technology, but in terms of health technology, and how do we actually get people tools, the technological tools that can help and empower them. And so he's doing some really, really wonderful things. Encourage people to check out abovephone.com. And if you are interested in buying a phone, if you go to theconsciousresistance.com, there's an ad I have there. You can click through that, and I think it gives you a discount, and I get a
Nice.
little affiliate link there as well. So if you want to make the purchase and support both of us, you can check that
Nice.
out, The Conscious Resistance.
Excellent. Okay, can you just give us a list of all of the places where we can find you and all your
Yep.
goods?
Yes, thank you so much again for the opportunity. So my main website is theconsciousresistance.com. So if you want to see the books we've been talking about, you want to check out my documentaries, interviews, podcasts, The Conscious Resistance has the bulk of my work. If you would like more of a look about some of my background, derrickbroze.com is just my kind of personal website. It was previously my website for my mayoral run. I ran for mayor in Houston last year, so you'll see some of that,
Yes.
but it's just kind of some more background. But as far as my content, theconsciousresistance.com. I'll also mention again freedomcells.org if you want to learn more about Freedom Cell movement. We hold a yearly annual event every year here in Mexico in January it's called the People's Reset. You can learn more about that at thegreaterreset.org. My 17-part documentary series is called The Pyramid of Power,
Oh,
thepyramidofpower.net. You can check that out. I've released 13 episodes so far. We got a couple more we're working
what?
on. And that's like episodes that are, the intention with this was to create fact-based information without the fear, porn behind it, the doomsday, and do it in under 30 minutes. So it goes from big education, corporate media, big pharma, big wireless, all these different aspects that are part of what I call this pyramid of power, and kind of progressively getting deeper and deeper. And each one gives you the fact-based information with a transcript with all of my resources. Every episode ends with suggested reading if you want to learn more or watch other documentaries. And of course, every episode ends with solutions. What can you actually do about this problem? And I've created it this way because it's meant to be bite-sized chunks that you can get your friends and family who think you're crazy and who won't watch a 5-hour documentary or read a book, but might sit down and watch a half an hour episode of something.
Yes.
And if you can pull them in, it is also meant to be bingeable too. So we've got 13 episodes so far, and we're basically releasing them in seasons of 4 episodes at a time. So by next month, if everything goes well, we'll be releasing episode 14 and finishing later on this year. And that's been a 3-year project that I'm really excited to finish. But so if you're
Wow.
looking for, I've heard people tell me that they've used the Pyramid of Power for their homeschooling assignments for their kids as well. So there's things like that. That's at thepyramidofpower.net. And I write articles to thelastamericanvagabond.com with Ryan
That's right.
Christian. I think that's probably it for now.
Wow. That's quite the resume.
I try to stay busy.
Yeah, I'd say. Wow. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. I know that you've got another thing going on with fluoride tomorrow. There's a big case happening right now in Houston, I believe, right?
The lawsuit is actually based in San Francisco.
Oh, it's in
It's a
San
federal
Fran.
trial. The court's in San Francisco, but it's a federal lawsuit. And yeah, if
Okay.
anybody wants to check that out, tomorrow, Tuesday, there will be an update. If you go to theconsciousresistance.com right now, it's pretty much all fluoride for the last 2 weeks as I've been
Yeah.
reporting from the courtroom. But there's some really, really empowering and educational interviews that I highly recommend anybody to watch, especially if there's any females in the audience, as I'm sure there are, and especially if there's any moms or soon to be moms or know anybody.
Right.
You want to watch these episodes because this is a poison and it's affecting mothers and their children. So please do
Yeah.
check out that information.
Thank you so much, Derrick. It's such a pleasure.
You're,
I'm so grateful for all of the work that you're doing for us. I mean, wonderful
thank
work.
you. I
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
that. Yeah, thank you for having me on and for all that you're doing. I'm excited to look more into some of your episodes, and yeah, definitely just stay in touch. Oh, happy to come back and share about anything anytime. So
I
thank
can't
you again.
wait. I'm sure we have lots more to talk about.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.